Welcome to the next installment of my video lecture series for microeconomic principles. And in this particular video, I'm going to be reviewing some of the potential test problems that could appear on test number 1, and that is occurring Monday, February 22nd. So this video, I'm going to concentrate on the items in Chapter 2, particularly the production possibilities frontier. So if we take a look at that first question, assuming constant / increasing, meaning that could be worded either constant or increasing opportunity cost, graphically illustrate a production possibilities frontier for beer and pizza. So make sure you understand the distinction between increasing and constant opportunity cost with respect to the PPF. Remember that a PPF with constant opportunity cost is a downward sloping line. And the opportunity cost is represented by the slope of this particular line. And let me draw this, let's say, right there. So this is our PPF. And this one exhibits constant opportunity cost as it is a straight line. The reason being is that, for example, let's say we start at this point here where we're producing all pizza and no beer. If I decide I want to move to this point there, I end up giving up 1 unit of pizza in order to gain 1 unit of beer. If I keep doing this, if I keep increasing the amount of beer I'm producing, what happens is, in order to gain that beer, that 1 beer, I have to again give up the same amount of pizza. So by increasing my beer production by 1 unit, I give up the same amount of pizza every single time. In this one, it happens to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So the slope of this line is constant, therefore this exhibits constant opportunity cost. If you are asked for increasing opportunity cost, let me get rid of this information here. Get rid of that point. If you're asked to draw a PPF that exhibits increasing opportunity cost, your PPF would look like this. The slope of this is constantly changing as you move along the PPF. It's relatively flat at the top and gets steeper and steeper, so therefore the slope is increasing and the opportunity cost is increasing. So make sure you remember the distinction between those two. The second part of the question says to show 3 points that illustrate an inefficient combination of outputs, an efficient combination of outputs, and a combination of outputs that is impossible to attain. Generally, when you're answering this question, you're best suited by starting with explaining what is actually on the PPF. And if you do that, it gives you a very convenient point with which to compare and contrast the other 2 points. So it really will strengthen your answer if you give a very good explanation, for example, of point B, the efficient combination of outputs. So let me make these slightly bigger so it's easier for everybody to see. So we have points A, B, and C. B is on the PPF, so if it's on the PPF, it would be good for you to provide a definition of the PPF. The PPF represents all the combinations of the 2 outputs, in this instance beer and pizza, that are possible to produce if the resources are being used efficiently. So by definition, the PPF represents output combinations that are possible and being produced efficiently. So once you do that, then it's easy to compare the other points. If you take a look at here, point C is to the right of the PPF. So if this is the maximum that is possible to produce with efficiency, C cannot be produced at the present time. All right? So if this is the maximum, this exceeds the maximum, point C cannot be produced presently. It could be produced in the future. For example, the PPF could shift outward to include C. If we had an increase in technology, that would shift the PPF outward. If we had an increase in labor or an increase in the amount of capital, the PPF could shift out to include this point at some point in time. So we've already defined what point B is. That's on the PPF. It's the most that can be produced with efficiency. Point A falls inside the PPF. So it's possible to produce point A, but it entails some level of inefficiency. We might have capital lying around that's not being utilized, for example. We might have pieces of machinery that we're not presently using. We might have workers that are idle and not working at all or not working a full week, etc. So make sure you're comfortable with that. And also when you explain your answer, I think it's very important for you to include a definition of the PPF when you're explaining the point that's on the PPF. It gives you a very convenient point to contrast the other 2 points, points A and C, with B, and would really strengthen your answer. So the next question is, assuming constant or increasing opportunity cost. I already illustrated that to you. Realize that for the first question, I just did the example assuming increasing opportunity cost. This would only be different for constant opportunity cost if that wording was changed, if it was constant opportunity cost, as long as the PPF is downward sloping. And let me move point B to there. This would be the what your graph should look like if you were asked for constant opportunity cost and illustrating the 2 points. The second question that's possible about the PPF, assuming constant or increasing opportunity cost. Again, I already stated that. I covered that. Graphically illustrate a production possibilities frontier for beer and pizza. Show the impact of an increase or decrease in the level of technology, capital, or labor. So if you see changing technology of capital and labor, realize that that's a generic change. I'm making no distinction about whether this impacts beer or pizza production, so you can assume that it impacts the production of both items. So here we have our original PPF. So let's say that there's an increase in the level of technology. Let me move this inside here. So this is our original PPF, and let me actually show this as PPF 0. So here's our original PPF. So if I were to increase the level of technology, an increase in the level of technology improves or increases the amount of production that can occur in this economy or for this particular company. So a generic increase in technology will cause the PPF to shift outward. So here let me actually just copy this over and then edit it. So that is PPF 1, and let me do the subscript on that. So when there's an increase in technology, the PPF will shift outward. And it might be helpful if you wanted to put some lines in here illustrating this. And let me put an arrow on the end of each one of those. So with an increase in technology, the PPF shifts outward. The same thing would occur if there's an increase in the capital stock. If you increase the amount of capital that's available for producing beer and pizza, that increases the maximum amount of output that can be produced for both items. So if the capital stock increases or the increase in the amount of capital, your diagram would look exactly the same. The same thing holds for an increase in the amount of labor. If labor is increasing, the amount of labor that's available for the production of beer and pizza, the PPF will shift outward. Also realize that I just assumed that there was constant opportunity cost with this one. At the beginning of the video, I distinguished between increasing and constant opportunity cost, the difference between those assumptions and how that impacts the shape of the PPF. So what would happen if we did the opposite? If we decreased the capital stock, we would see the exact opposite occurring. A decrease in the capital stock would cause the PPF to shift inward instead of outward. So our original PPF would be this one. This would be the new PPF, and we would have an inward shift, and let me change that so that the arrows are shifting inward. So if we have a decrease in the level of technology, we would start at this original PPF. The decrease in the level of technology would shift the PPF inward. Same thing would hold if I were to decrease the capital stock. If the capital stock shrunk. For example, if this were a company and let's say the factory had a fire and some of the capital that was used for beer and pizza production was destroyed. So the capital stock shrunk. The company still stayed open because it still had some facilities for beer and pizza production. So their PPF would shift inward to reflect the fact that they have fewer pieces of capital to make beer and pizza. And the same thing would hold for the labor supply. If there was a decreasing amount of labor, for example, if this firm laid off individuals, they would be able to produce less beer and pizza. So if this was their original PPF before the layoffs, this is the new PPF after the layoffs, and the shrinking of the amount of labor available for the production of beer and pizza shifted the production possibilities for Frontier inward. Also, realize that the change might not be a generic change. Let me give you an example of this. I might be very specific, or the question might be very specific. So, for example, if the question said, assuming constant opportunity cost, we have a PPF that exhibits constant opportunity cost for the production possibilities frontier, that let's say the fire occurred in the brewing section of this factory, and that all the capital in the pizza end of the factory was untouched, but the capital in the brewing sector, the brewing section, was partially destroyed. That would cause the PPF to shift in this fashion. This is the original PPF right here. But because the fire occurred in the brewing portion of the factory and some of the capital that was used exclusively for brewing beer was destroyed, the PPF shifts inward in this fashion. So let me copy this, duplicate it, bring it over, and denote that as PPF1. And also drawing in something like that, sort of showing that this is rotating inward. Realize that with the fire occurring in the brewing portion of the factory, none of the capital that was used to produce pizza was impacted. So therefore, the level of production of beer is going to shrink. And this is going to cause the PPF to rotate inward as indicated by this. This would be the same, for example, if there was a loss of technology in beer production, the PPF would rotate inward in a similar fashion. And the same thing would hold if there was a decrease in the number of workers available for beer production. Let's say there were layoffs exclusively to the brewing portion of this particular company. The PPF would shift inward like that. So make sure you realize that if I give you a specific change in technology or capital or labor, it's only going to impact the maximum that could be produced of that particular item. So if I say that the capital stock, a portion of the capital stock was destroyed in a fire in the brewing portion of the factory, you know that that's only going to impact the maximum amount of beer that could be produced, while the amount of pizza that can be produced, if we used all our resources in pizza production, is going to remain unchanged. So make sure you're comfortable with that particular distinction.